Hello and welcome to Contemporary American Foreign Policy. I'm Andrew Milton and I am the instructor for this course. And I want to make a few introductory comments before we get started. If you have your syllabus in front of you, you'll see that the course is divided on a week-by-week basis. We read something each week, usually a book, and then you have to respond during the reading and then after the reading, and then you have to respond to posts from your colleagues as well. It's pretty straightforward, and it's the same pattern each week. And those are listed in the syllabus, as well as in the discussion forum board. If you also have a document open called the 3 I's, One Many Intro, I want to say a couple of words about some introductory overview material for the course that we'll work our way through. I hope you'll use as we work our way through the content. So you're reading the assigned material for each week and posting those posts each week. And then halfway through the course or partway through the course, we'll do a midterm exam, an essay take-home exam, and then after the course, the final exam. And the great bulk of the course, for me, in my mind, rests on you're doing a term paper, which I'll either describe in a future video or post a document describing it. But let me today take just a couple minutes to tell you two ideas that I think are kind of interesting that you may or may not decide to use. For me, these ideas become kind of intellectual frameworks by which I filter a lot of what I encounter in the world, not just American foreign policy, but anything. So these are not theories of foreign policy per se, but they are intellectual constructs that might help you filter material in a more general way. So let me make a couple comments, and you might, on the one many problem, you might read along on the material that's further down the document. Let me say quickly, the 3 I's are the answer to the question, what drives history? What makes things happen? Why do things go the way they go? The social science project is one in which we try to understand, figure out how things operate, why they operate the way they do, and how they might be changed. That's a normative project, by the way, how changing them. Things change, and we want to explain that, be able to understand that, and we might also want to even shape that change process. But for us as social science analysts, we want to at least understand it first. So, to answer a question in a general way, what drives history, and to say that it's institutions, individuals, and ideas, is to offer a sort of shorthand construct for an answer to that. Let me help you understand what I mean by those 3 I's, institutions, individuals, and ideas. When I say institutions, I mean patterned arrangements of interaction between and among people, or states, or groups, or nationalities, or organizations. Institutions are often bureaucratic organizations, but you think about patterned relationships, formal and informal relationships and patterns. And that's what allows us to say things like marriage is an institution. Teaching and learning, classrooms have institutional arrangements. This arrangement of me talking to a video camera with nobody in the room and you watching perhaps in private is an institutional arrangement that's relatively new to education. Normally you've been sitting in the same room with me, we'd be talking together. This is a different institutional structure. So the idea of institutions is those sets of patterns, norms, rules, regularized and informal, that establish predictable routine of interaction. So states fight wars, that's an institutional arrangement. States have diplomats who engage in the process of diplomacy and negotiation. Those are institutional orders. So an institution is a patterned arrangement of relationships. Individuals, of course, are people. That individual actors matter. This is the story where it matters whether or not Barack Obama is president compared to John McCain. The individual characters or actors have their own value sets, and they have their own goals, and they undertake they pursue those goals according to their own individual capacities and constraints. And so the individual players matter. Well, let me explain and then come back with some examples. Ideas are that notion that the thought patterns, the ideologies, as you might think of it as the isms, are what drive people to do things, or what drive our interactions. It's the shaping of behavior by the big ideas. Clearly, all three of these are in play. Individuals carry ideas, and they institutionalize them. So I tend to be an institutionalist myself. It doesn't mean that I think only institutions matter, but they seem most compelling to me, because institutions tend to generate opportunities for us to do things, but also constrain us. And it's within institutional parameters, within the boundaries of institutional structures, that we actually go do things, at least in modern, developed Western society. So one can think about these different competing forces, if you will. We think about, well, for instance, did we think that Osama bin Laden was the problem, that individual, and his presence or absence on the scene was going to change the way that the world worked? Or did we think that the idea, some call it Islamofascism, Islamic fundamentalism, whatever, did we think that the idea of that particular philosophy was going to be what drove the world and what drove interaction? And that the absence or presence of a particular individual who happened to be carrying the idea was irrelevant. Remove one individual and someone else will carry the idea because the idea has force and has presence. And further then, and what are the institutional arrangements that may or may not be present and make possible certain kinds of interactions? So a great example is to have watched Soviet specialists after the collapse of the Soviet Union, who were accustomed to a certain set of institutional arrangements and even idea and individual organizational structures or manifestations of those. Interacting in international politics in a certain kind of way. Once that idea set called communism collapsed, and the institutional structure called Soviet Union collapsed, and those individuals went away, who were Gorbachev, for instance, those people studying the world from that perspective were at a bit of a loss to deal with what new ideas were relevant, what new institutional structures were going to be potent, and what ideas were going to be institutionalized into the process of international politics. So I don't want you to think that the three I's are the explanation, but they're a tool for helping me filter and sort and organize different sets of issues. If you think that it's particularly relevant that we elect a Democrat or a Republican for president because he or she will have a better foreign policy, you're operating on in an individual level analysis. If you tend to think, it doesn't really matter who's elected because the institutions of international politics are so potent, they really kind of constrain an actor from doing something. Here's an example, not to pick on anybody, not to criticize, but when Barack Obama ran for president in 2008, he promised he was going to close Guantanamo Bay detention facility within a year of his election. A year came and went, and he didn't close it. And so the question is, well, why not? Is it that the idea of closing it wasn't really a very good one? Is it whether the individual called Barack Obama wasn't strong enough? Or was it the institution called imprisoning foreign terrorists too great to overcome? So that's what I mean by filtering or organizing or sorting according to the three I's. We'll talk more about this. I'll post things about it, or I'll perhaps put up other videos. But so if you have questions, please go to the discussion board whose name escapes me, but basically I have a question about foreign policy that you asked there, and I'm happy to have us engage in that. Quickly, the one-many problem is also interesting because it is a philosophical problem that's existed since people have lived together. Quickly, because I'm running out of time, the many of us, each of us, have our own set of values and preferences and goals and pursuit of those values. But to live together in society, we have to have one set of rules that applies to all of us. That means the many of us usually have to subordinate at least some of our preferences and some of our values and some of our goals to the order that comes from the one set of rules. We only need rules to live together because we need some amount of constraining of our individual desires, goals, and preferences. But there's a tension, because the more of my own individual values and preferences I have to give up, the better payoff I need to get from that one set of rules. So all of us have to live in one society, even though we have many views, values, and preferences. And doing so, if the many values, preferences, and goals are very divergent, there are going to be more complications about how to do that, how to strike the balance between the one and the many. Further, there's lots of interesting implications for things like democracy and democratization. We'll talk more about this. I'll later post another video, I think, offering you some analyses of that. But I want you to have some sense, because I might offer or might give you a response about many issues. Give you an example. If we are trying to democratize a particular region that has many different ethnic groups with different tribal or identifications, who have different religious orientations all laid over the top of that, those identity structures, and we're wanting them to commit to a process, a one organized process called democracy. That means subordinating certain kinds of identities to the outcome of the democratic procedure, in which we have one set of rules with one governing body, even though that governing organization might have different characters come into and out of it because of the electoral process. We're still asking people to subordinate various aspects of their identity to the democratic process and its outcomes. And this is a complicated facet of political life. So I will elucidate a little bit further some concerns and critiques of the democratization process from this perspective later in the term. But I just want you to have some sense that there's something at stake here, that when many of us try to live together in one community or one society, there's going to be tensions to trade off and balance there. If you look in your the 3 I's, One Many intro document, there's a little bit longer discussion of the one many problem. Again, if you have some questions, please post and let us discuss. And until I'm able to post another video, I hope you enjoy the course and get in contact soon. Thank you.